Hey, what is up? This is Jake with Exodus. On this week's episode of Whitetail Cribs, we just stopped in Indiana with Chris Fischvogt. Now, Chris has been hunting his entire life, and he has a room to show it. You gotta check out a rare albino coon, some giant whitetails, and for everyone that loves tractors, a 4020 John Deere from 1970. When this is live, we're gonna be in Iowa, so if there's anywhere we need to make a pit stop for a recording, let us know in the comments. Hopefully you've been out shed hunting. Here's a couple fresh ones from the last couple of days, and let's go ahead and get right into it.
Hey guys, what's up? Come on in. I'm Chris Fischvogt from southeastern Indiana, and welcome to the Maskatatuck Whitetails North Lodge. Gonna look around at some deer today and some antlers, and hope to have a good time. And here, this is my dad, and this is Phil Mize, my good friend. He's my business partner, and he's a buddy of mine. And my dad, he's the reason I got into all this deer hunting at the ripe old age of 9 years old, and I haven't looked back. And as you can see, I've been very blessed and very fortunate, so I owe it all to him. And here is a pile of sheds. I find probably 20, 25 sheds a year. Most of them are right around here. Find a lot of them in waterways, field edges. And as here, you can see this coon. This is an albino coon. This coon was killed by my grandpa in 1955. And this was his trophy of a lifetime. Well, fast forward 50 years, right across the road from where he killed this coon, I killed a 183-inch triple drop tine buck right in the same area. So it's pretty cool that his trophy of a lifetime came from the same exact area as mine. As we go through the lodge here, I'll point out some various things. Here's a lot of family pictures and things through the years of our success in deer hunting and turkey hunting. Now here we get into some pretty special sheds here. I had seen this buck with another deer laying in a thicket, and I used to drive my four-wheeler by there every evening, and I would look at this deer and his buddy, and I never bothered him. I'd always get within about 200 yards and just watched him. Well, one night I thought, I'm going to see how close I can get to that deer. Well, I got over there, and when the deer stood up, he had one antler, and I thought, I know he just had two. I thought he had to drop one right there. So this deer takes off running, and all of a sudden he has no antlers. So I run down over the hill and I pick up both of his antlers. And the deer is standing over on a ridge about 150 yards away looking at me like, hey, you got my antlers. And here's a picture of him laying in the snow with the fresh blood. Then here's my most prized set of sheds. I found these about 1.5 miles apart one day. Anybody can find an 85-incher, but when you find a couple of these little things, that's pretty cool. Here's a shed that my little boy found at 2 years old. My little boy and my daughter and me were shed hunting in a cedar thicket here on the farm, and he's whining and complaining about everything, and he's tripping in the snow, and we're kind of blowing him off, kind of getting tired of hearing it. And the next thing you know, he's hollering louder than normal, and I'm looking back and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on now? What's wrong? And he's holding this antler. The snow's dripping off of it. And I'm thinking, there's no way. Me and my little girl just stepped over top this antler, and he's got it. He finds it. Pretty cool find. He's found a lot since then. Here's a picture of my mom and dad and I. We all killed 10-pointers in 2 days. It's pretty cool. That probably never will happen again. Here's all my record book certificates. I have 8 in the Hoosier record book. To my knowledge, that's the most of anybody. Now we'll get into looking at the deer mounts. I killed this deer when I was 16 years old. I was sitting on the ground with a bow. He field dressed 259 pounds. To this date, that's still my biggest buck as far as weight. And here's a pretty decent 10-pointer I killed a few years back with a shotgun. Here's a pretty nice 11-pointer I killed several years ago on a military hunt with a shotgun. the wildlife officer aged him at over 8.5 years old. That was pretty cool. That's the oldest deer I've ever shot. This deer, he came off the same military refuge, and I shot him one morning. It was 4 degrees when I shot this deer, and I saw the deer coming down off of a ridge about 10:30 in the morning. And when he came down toward me, the creek was completely frozen. He took both front hooves and was pawing on the ice to try to break the ice to get a drink. Well, as soon as he raised his head up, I shot him and dropped him, and he slid out on the ice, and the rest is history. He's a 152-inch 12-pointer. Pretty cool deer. He's got a pretty cool brow tine. This buck here, I shot him the last night of muzzleloader season. I think it was 2012. And as soon as I shot this deer, it started snowing. I went to the hit site. I found 1 drop of blood, but that was it. And with the smoke, with the powder back then, I didn't use smokeless powder back then. I couldn't see anything as far as where the deer went. So it was up in the air where the deer went. There was no blood, and it was snowing like crazy. So I couldn't find him. Fast forward about 3 weeks later, and we find this deer in our bridge. He is wedged in the beams of our bridge coming back onto our farm. So I had spent 3 weeks looking for this deer every place I could think of, and all of a sudden, here's the deer in our bridge. And we pried him out, and the rest is history. And you can see that he has a summer cape because his cape was ruined when we found him. But we had somebody that had a summer cape, and we put it on him and mounted him. Like I say, he's 157. And I've got his sheds, which are right here. This is his sheds from the year before. And you can see he had his G4 broke the year before, exactly the same as the year I killed him. So that was pretty cool. Next we have this deer. He was the first Hoosier record book deer I killed. I hunted him out in a little bitty patch woods in the middle of a cow pasture in about an acre woods. And the first morning I hunted him, here he came about 9:30 in the morning, and I shot him at 10 yards with an H&R Ultra Slug 12 gauge out of an old Loggy Bio tree stand. That was back in 2002. That was the first book deer I had ever killed. Now this deer, I killed him here on this farm. I started getting pictures of him in late October on scrapes. And I told all my buddies, I said, I think he'll go right at 160. But I said, he's definitely the deer I'm going to try to kill. So first week of rifle season, he shows up, and I shoot him with my 300 Win Mag, and he's 158 7/8. Here's the shed from this deer from the year before. This deer scores 183. He's got 18 points. The week before, he actually had 20 points. I had him on video. I seen him come in one night. I was sitting in a tree stand, and there were 16 does in front of me. I was watching the does. Well, all of a sudden, I see a buck come from my left, and I don't think he's a real big deer, but I can't tell just the way his antlers are in the cornfield and the height I was in my stand. I just couldn't tell what he was for certain. So I watched him, and I started thinking, man, that's a pretty nice deer. He surely goes over 140. Well, I pull up my scope on my rifle, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the one I'm hunting. So he turns broadside, and I shot him through the shoulders and dropped him. He's got 18 points, and he scores 183. This deer here, he is my biggest deer. He scores 195 1/8 gross. He nets 190 4/8 non-typical, and he nets 170 typical. So he nets Boone and Crockett. We started seeing this deer. I killed him in 2006. We saw this deer in 2005. My dad had jumped him up. He was bush hogging, and he was right behind a little cedar tree. Dad told me, he said, I jumped up a shooter today while I was bush hogging. So I went over and checked out his bed. And his bed was about twice the size of a car hood, and it was smooth as silk. He had wore the dirt down, and he was in head-high horseweeds where he was laying. Well, he had laid there so much that the dirt was just, it was crazy. I've never seen a bed like that before. So right then we knew that that was a resident deer. So on October 23rd, these are back in the old camera days with film cameras. I got his picture on October 23rd. Well, I finally got the film developed on about the 30th. So I decided I'm gonna hunt this deer, and this is the only deer I'm gonna hunt this year. Took a month vacation off, and the first night I hunted him, I rattled about 5 o'clock, 5:20 in the evening, here he came. and he saw me. He was on a four-wheeler trail and he was looking straight at me. And I thought, this is it. I'm never gonna kill this deer. He sees me. I've got my bow in my hand and I'm standing here, but I can't move a muscle. So he gets nervous and he walks around me about 40 yards. Well, he gets downwind of me and he sticks his nose up in the air. And I'm instantly thinking, now I know it's over. Well, I couldn't believe it. I had doe and heat out and I had dominant buck urine out. He smelled one of them or both of them, and he did an about face and walked right back by me, and I shot him at 18 yards with a Matthews bow and put a 100-grain thunderhead through his lungs. He ran about 70 yards. The rest is history. So that's my biggest, and pretty proud of that one for sure. Now this deer right here, this deer, he is probably the deer I'm most proud of. He scores 154. Everybody in the area knew about this deer. And I can remember my dad saying one year, he said, boy, if anybody ever kills that deer, he's gonna be one heck of a trophy to somebody. Well, I never thought it would be me. I had 3 years worth of pictures of that deer, and I've got 5 sheds of his, 2 full sets. The year before, he was 161. The only time I ever laid eyes on that deer was the morning I killed him. I shot him at 140 yards with an H&R Ultra Slug 12 gauge. I shot him 3 weeks into November, and he had ran a lot of his weight off, and he still weighed 220. So he was a heck of a big deer. And still to this day, I think that's probably my top deer out of all these. This buck here is pretty special. I started getting pictures of him in late October. I actually seen him the first morning I hunted him. I had him at 35 yards with a bow, but he was 1/4 and I wouldn't take a shot. Didn't want to take a chance on a deer like that. I ended up seeing that deer 9 times before I pulled the trigger on him. I had 135 hours in hunting that deer. And the 3rd week of November, he came by at 40 yards and I shot him with a rifle. This deer was on a farm I know really well. My family was raised in the area. I was raised in the area. It was right by my dad's childhood home. And 50 years prior to me killing this deer is the coon over there, the white coon. That's where my grandpa killed this coon, just across the road from this deer. So when I shot this deer, I couldn't believe it. My life goal had always been a drop tine deer, and this one's got 2. He's got 1 small one on the other side, so actually you could say he's got 3. So he scores 182 inches, and this deer was killed on basically my church's property, just right behind the church. So where I killed this deer is where I am going to be buried. It's where my grandparents are buried, where my mom and dad are going to be buried. Several times I saw this buck within sight of my grandparents' headstone, and where one of these days I'm going to be laid to rest. Hopefully in many years, but someday I'm going to be living right where this deer lived, or that's where I'm going to be staying. So anyway, that deer is pretty special. And then here is a 162-inch deer I killed with a muzzleloader. I killed it right behind my house a few years back. He's 21 7/8 inside, so he's a really cool deer too, one of my better ones. Then here I have a 142-inch deer I killed on a wildlife refuge just south of me on a draw hunt a few years back. He's a 12-pointer. Here's some various skulls I've found through the years. Here's one that was found, I think it was 2015. He scores 151. Pretty cool deer. You can see that tine right there. I've never seen one like that before. And I score deer for the Hoosier record book, and I have never seen a tine like that. So that's pretty unique. I'm not sure what caused it, but pretty cool. Here's back into the old trail cam days. There's an old film cam tracker from years ago. Things have changed a lot since then. Here's my biggest shed I've ever found. I just found it this year. This is the small side of the buck. Don't know where the other side is. We looked everywhere for it, but have no idea where it's at. We don't know if this deer is alive or not. We don't have record of anybody killing it, but we also don't have any more trail cam pictures of it, so not sure what happened to it, but pretty fortunate, pretty lucky to find this antler. Here's another one of my better ones. He scores 80 inches. Got some cool forks on it. Now I want to show you one more thing. It's pretty special to me and my family. This is out in what we call the recreation room. Here's a 1970 John Deere tractor, a 4020 that my grandpa bought new in 1970. My dad ended up getting it back in about 10 years ago. That's pretty cool. Helps out with chores here on the farm and plant food plots and things like that. Well, and here I'd like to show you a few of the deer that we've put guys on through the years here at Maskatatuck Whitetails. Like I said, we're an outfitter here in southeastern Indiana. We've got a little over 10,000 acres. We've put some guys on some really nice deer. You can see there's a whole display of nice bucks on this page. And I want to leave you with, a lot of people say that I'm lucky to kill these big deer. And you know what, I am lucky, but it's not luck that kills the deer. It's luck of having a family that supports your hunting habit and your hobby. It's luck that my dad introduced me how to deer hunt and taught me the morals and ethics to do it right. I'm lucky to have a wife that supports it, kids that are outdoors with me all the time. That's the reason I consider myself lucky, and all of these deer are just an added bonus. So I appreciate you guys coming and hope the snow doesn't get you down, and we'll see you later.